Welcome to the Atomic Level, the show where we decode the matters of wealth one insightful conversation at a time with the rising stars in finance, business, and tech so that you can grow and protect your net worth and your net happiness. I'm Chris Snook, and today I welcome my counsel and my partner and my friend, Matt Miley. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's great to be here. I always like sharing topics with other people. And, I've affectionately called these in the past Matt chats. So I hope
And
that
that's what I
will.
was going to say. We are launching a new form of the Atomic Shields and Succession um, office hours. This is the first of its kind, and these are the Matt Chats. We're officially bringing Matt Chats into the Wealth Matters ecosystem under the Shields and Succession column. So, what we're looking for today specifically is we're going to unpack the article that you and I wrote earlier in this week on Shields and Succession, and I'm just going to basically you're going to be my sounding board, but there's a strange contradiction that's happening. A lot of Americans over 50 don't have even the basic documents in place. If they do, they might be out of date. And at the same time, we're kind of hitting a peak anxiety. And a lot of that anxiety has been pointed at the wrong targets. Some of the topics, for those who didn't see that we mentioned about the cliff and some of these other things. So people are worried about estate taxes, whether they're talking about it or not. They're worried about bigger risks with unfunded trusts, state beneficiary forms, long-term care, probate, family, blah, 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 blah. So we had to do Matt chats. We had to start doing these. We're going to do them every Wednesday so that we can just have a conversation with folks and humanize this. And I can't think of anybody better because you're who I go to this to just have these conversations with and illuminate the things that people are concerned about, maybe the things they should be thinking about. And again, this is educational. So the disclaimer for everyone here, just in case you weren't already clear, is this is not legal advice. Matt is a lawyer. He practices in the state of Wyoming with national clients as well as Colorado. Been doing that for 38 years, but he is not your lawyer. Not yet. And so until that's the case, none of this should be construed as legal advice, financial advice, or anything in between. But this should be used as a conversation starter, as a thought-provoking, action-oriented dialogue. And we hope that you'll get value that you can take and put into action with whoever your advisors are. And obviously, if you're interested in connecting with Matt on any and all these topics and you're in a place where he can serve you, then we'll put those numbers in there and you can certainly do what I did, which is make him your counsel. So anyway, all that disclaimer stuff behind. Anything to add to that, Matt, before we get into the actual meat of this that you need for liability or compliance purposes?
Yeah, just the fact that a lot of the opinions I have are just opinions that are what I would do, not necessarily what a attorney would ask you to do. So I think your disclaimer was pretty pretty broad there, and that's just want to remind people this is kind of the things that I've done with my experience, but don't necessarily mean, hey, here's what you should do from a legal standpoint.
Yeah, it's a great segue, actually. So the first thing I want to talk about in this segment is a stat that we published in the article earlier this week that 73% of people say that estate planning, legacy planning, succession planning, trust and wills, you name it, matter. They understand that this is important, but under 56% of them have actually done anything about it or have documents in place that would be executable. So there's a knowledge and doing gap. And again, opinions, everyone's got them, and they're based on what we know and what we know we don't know and what we know, everything in between. At the end of the day, though, this knowledge and doing gap is the thing that I think you deal with really well. And I've watched you work with myself and my family as well as others. So the question I have is just as it relates to that first concern, um, why do you see, what have you learned about why people don't cross that knowledge gap? What's in the way?
A lot of it is just the fear of the unknown, and the biggest unknown is what happens when you die. And how do you face that on a regular basis? I think we're all fearful of dying, and we don't really want to do it. And so how do you talk about it? How do you talk about when you have your demise and things like that? The other part that goes into this that I've found, Chris, is that people just don't even know what an estate is. Why do you have to plan for an estate? What's an estate? Well, you watch those big TV shows, PBS, Downton Abbey, and all those things. Estate is obviously a ton of money, which it's not. Estate is just your stuff. An estate plan is just how do you orderly move your stuff from one generation to the next generation. And that's basically what it is. But because people think there's a lot of dollars involved or that, an estate doesn't fit them, that they're their condo and their car can be considered an estate. People don't think they need to plan. And then another reason is when you are single, you're an individual, and you don't have a spouse and you don't have any kids, and you think that, well, I don't have anyone to protect, I don't have anyone to give my stuff, I don't need a plan, which is kind of runs opposite of what really needs to happen, because if you have a spouse, if you have children who are going to receive your money, they're your champions. They're going to figure this out because they want to get the stuff, right? If you don't have anybody, that's the quagmire. That's when we don't have anyone to step in. Do you have a pastor or a neighbor or a creditor step in to try to get your estate to where it's supposed to go? So I think it's just the misnomer and the misunderstanding that, number one, I don't have an estate. Number two, it's really, really scary to figure out. And number three, I don't have anyone who wants my stuff anyway, so therefore I don't need to plan.
I love that that's how you answered that because I can see that. I mean, I've long said, human beings think in pictures, and words give us a picture. When you say estate, what you just clarified is the reason why a lot of people don't do it. The knowledge doing gap exists is because estate means a castle or it means something. And a lot of especially this audience, we focus on families that are, between 2 to 30 million typically, which means they've accumulated wealth, but that might be 50% in their house because they bought it 25 years ago in northern Colorado, and here we are, right? Like they don't think of themselves as an estate. And I think that's so clarifying is it's just your stuff. That's a really so what do you want to have happen with your stuff? And more importantly, who do you want to make those decisions when you can't? And so talk about that a little bit because that is the other piece of it is like forget even if you care about stuff. Who do you want making decisions about you or your stuff when you cannot?
Right. And even though we may not care about this stuff or know that we're supposed to care about this stuff, typically the government and the state cares about. And so they have a plan for you. And when you get that out to people that, hey, even if you don't have anything written down, you do have an estate plan, a state estate plan. They want to know where the property goes. They want to know who to tax. They want to know who's going to get paid and all that kind of stuff. So you do have a plan. And so sometimes when we start saying, okay, well, you have a plan, even though you haven't written one, and this plan actually gives your money to someone else other than your kids, or you disinherit your kids because of this plan, or all your property gets lost that could benefit others. It gets lost. It gets stuck in the state system. We call that escheats to the state. The state gets it, or it's all going to get gobbled up in taxes. Then all of a sudden, people are like, "Well, dang! If I got an estate plan anyway, I might as well at least write on a cocktail napkin on the back of that what I want, where I want it to go, and who I want it to benefit, because I didn't know I had a plan." And that's
Right.
a
I
good
think
thing.
I think that's the big, so anytime there's a knowledge and doing gap, there needs to be a catalyst or a reason why I take action. And I think a lot of times if we have this picture in our mind of certain words and we don't identify with those words, like you mentioned earlier, that's not a reason to act. But when you say something as powerful and as clear as you don't have a written plan that you designed, but there is a plan for your stuff and your life when you become incapacitated. You just don't know what that plan is because you didn't doctor it and you didn't author it and you're not an expert in the law of where you live. And I think once somebody hears that, they go, huh, I think I need to look at what that plan looks like and see if I agree with it.
Right, because the problems you leave is kind of your legacy. I mean, that's how you're going to be remembered, right? If you're if you don't have a plan, but you're married, have no kids, a lot of states default to the statutes, and the statute says, well, your parents, if you don't have any kids, your parents get 25% of your estate, while your spouse gets the other 75%, or some fraction thereof. And so now you've just left, your house, your only asset, your only estate. You've left your house in co-ownership with your spouse and his or her in-laws. What could go wrong? Right? So people are like, I don't want to be remembered as the guy that left me ownership of my house with my mother-in-law or my father-in-law. I want to have that all go to me. And it's like when you have blended marriages and things like that. When you bring a child into the marriage, that child may get 25%. or some number there of the estate when you die and you pass it on to your spouse. Well, now, your kids and somebody's non-biological parents co-own the property. I mean, what could go wrong? Even gets worse if you're in a divorce and you have a child and then you get real married. Well, now that child gets 25%, your current spouse gets 25%, and if the child's not old enough to manage the money, it's gonna be managed by your ex-spouse. So now your current spouse and your ex-spouse are co-owners of that house. What could go wrong, right? You start getting that stuff out there, and people are like, "Well, I don't I want an estate now. I want a plan. I don't want that to happen. I don't wanna disinherit my kids. I don't want my ex and my current to co-own my stuff. Or I don't want my ex and my current to come in and decide when they're gonna unplug me from the, life support." I mean, this is how the state laws, react because there is a plan. You just may not like it.
So, I mean, you touched on a bunch there, and maybe in your you've been doing this for 3 decades, so there's these different fears that kind of become aware. Some people just had them for the first time, other people may have been thinking about them dormantly for a while, but there's a fear of the cost, okay, whatever. There's the fear of just not wanting to be a mess, right? Like, a lot of people, I think, we don't think we're gonna die, and we know it's inevitable, but none of us, unless we have had something happen, none of us think we're gonna die today or tomorrow, and the reality is none of us know. And so, sometimes it's not out of, anything other than just forgetting that life is fragile for a minute. And so there's the fear of the cost. There's the fear of family conflicts, which is a catalyst because you go, man, you know what? Yeah, I could do something about that. I do not want to put people in a position where while they're grieving me, they also are now infighting because they can't agree on what to do with stuff while they're grieving me. Like, that's not something I want to leave as my legacy to my family. Forget legacy in the public media. Just, I don't want that to be what they remember. Right. So there's that. Then there's the fear of making the wrong choice or just flat out overwhelmed. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with, and maybe there's paradigms in there that are programmed from whatever around money and transfer and inheritance and entitlement and who knows. There sometimes it's just overwhelm. Have you seen a consistent thread? Like, does one stand out consistently more often than not as the reason why they finally come to doing something about it?
Yeah, we do have some strands and themes in what we're talking about. A lot of it is protecting the kids from strangers being their guardianship if they're not old enough. From going to foster care while we're appointing that permanent guardian, those kind of things. That keep our children out of foster care when something happens to mom and dad at the same time. I mean, that's a really definition of a bad day is when you lose both your parents and you go to foster care the same day. Um, so people come in and take care of their kids. How do you make medical decisions for your children if they don't have a medical power of attorney in place or something like that? I mean, you're not on the HIPAA release, so you can't find out about them, but you're supposed to make decisions, but you can't talk to the doctors or whatever. There's just things that get people empowered to do that. Another big reason people come in is we talked about disinheritance and the incapacity and those kind of things, but also, losing your property. I mean, if no one knows where your property is supposed to go, how are we gonna find it once you're dead? Well, it's all on my smartphone. Great. Does anyone have your information get in the smartphone? How do we know what bank accounts you have and things like that? And you just lose the property, and that could benefit somebody, and so now you're being known as the person who let all their money go, to the government instead of to their loved ones, which isn't good. Or you gave it to an unknown person who was on some kind of government benefit and you left them too much money. So you bounced them off their benefit. That's now you're known as the person who ruined the person's Medicaid or their medical plan. There's all these things that we see in there. But I guess, when people come to talk to us the most is usually around Thanksgiving or Christmas. And my theory on that is that they're spending time with their loved ones and their brothers and sisters and things like that. And they first time they've seen each other in a year or two, and they're in there saying, "Wow, do I look that bad? Am I really that old? Man, I better go get a plan. If I look anything like my younger sibling, wow, I better go in and get a plan today." So that's kind of what we see as well, why people come in. But the main reason, I guess, is when we go out and do these presentations or these mat chats or things like that, we tell people what can happen, but then we show, simple solutions on how to fix that. And so all of a sudden, disinheriting someone becomes an option, which you could fix if you wanted.
Yeah. You brought something up there I just had a personal experience with, and again, I've been in technology for almost 2 decades, and, I have probably put more thought into the design of backup systems and privacy and things than the average bird. I'm not saying I have it nailed, and I'm just saying I've spent a lot more time thinking about it, and I just got smacked in the face with the fragility of it literally last week. The incident is irrelevant, but my bag had my laptop and my phone in it. It was not in my vehicle. It was in my wife's vehicle. There was an issue that incapacitated all of that early in the morning while I was walking on the beach. I didn't bring my phone because I'd wanted to be phone free. Um, and, uh, and I wasn't able to have my phone or any of my stuff back for about 7 hours. And I had meetings, I had live streams, I had a bunch of stuff. And so I went to the hotel that I know well because I walk through there and I know people that work there at the local beach. And I asked them if I could use their phone. And they don't have a lot of landlines. And the one that they did was only at the front desk. And so, okay, I'm trying, but I don't know anybody's number.
Right.
Right? I don't remember anybody's number anymore. I remembered my father's number. I know my wife's number, but she was not available because she was part of the reason why this was not available. I know my son, who's 14, who has a flip phone. I know his number, but he's not answering because he's at school and he doesn't bring his phone to school. So I have one person I can call that I know, and I have a business partner who I know their number, one guy, Danny, but he didn't answer because he was on do not disturb. So starting to see the picture here. So then I'm like, I need help. I need to get into my email, and I need that. Well, I'm in a hotel, so they have their firewalls, so they will not let me into Proton Mail. They will not let me into Gmail. When I go there, my 2FA gets hit, but guess what? The 2FA triggers my phone, don't have my phone, can't answer the 2FA, can't get in. And this is when you just realize how these simple things can be cataclysmic. Like, forget the fact that no matter how much I've written down seed phrases, all this stuff, I can't even get into my email to let people know I'm going to miss a meeting. And imagine if something actually happened. Like the good news was this was not the end of the world. Someone didn't die. Someone wasn't, right? That's the good news.
Hmm.
We were able to figure it out 7 hours later when I got the things back. But any number of things can happen today to us, and that's the reality that we live in. So, how does someone even know where to get started? What is the thing that they do first when they decide I'm not going to procrastinate anymore? What do
Well,
you recommend?
I just, I add in there that it made it a little better, if that's a good word, because you were alive and kicking and able to do all these things. If you would have been found on the beach unconscious, knowing even people to contact would have made this even more of a nightmare for you. So the the big thing is just the awareness. You know that something needs to be done. And know that you need an advocate, someone to at least be able to talk to the doctor for you, or talk to your bank or something should you not be able to. So that's the main thing, is just the awareness of knowing, okay, something has to happen, because even under the state estate plan, yeah, you gotta have somebody who knows to look and do the right things to follow the statutes and things like that. So everyone needs a champion, whether it's your spouse or your kids, if they're, adults. Even a 14-year-old can figure stuff out if they know they're supposed to. So that's the first thing, and that's why we do these kind of talks, these mat chats. It's also why we bring out do presentations in our community once every 2 weeks, just to bring this out to people, to let them know that it is a possibility, that it can happen, and that there are ways to fix it. And so the big thing is that awareness to know that it can happen. And it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be life threatening. It can be smoothly taken care of.
Yeah, and I mean, so it's another good segue. I wanna talk about kind of we'll come back and forth to some of this stuff, but I wanna talk about talking to your parents about money or any of this stuff without making it weird, right? So, What we found is, and why we're doing these on Substack, why we're opening up these Matt chats and Shields in Succession and trying to go beyond the article stuff, which is valuable. You guys should read the articles. We've got a lot of great stuff in there, a lot of great resources. So if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Make sure you check out the stuff that Matt and I have been writing together on that Shields in Succession newsletter here. But why we're doing these is because the conversation is what brings that to life. The conversation is what humanizes it, because we're all dealing with it at some level, whether we're boomers, whether we're millennials, whether we're Gen Z, or whether we're Gen X. And right now, Gen X, which is my generation, and you're in that generation too, we're kind of the bookends of Gen X, is kind of dealing with the sandwich, right? We got aging parents, if we're fortunate enough to still have them, and they pretty much have all the wealth. Like statistically, the transfer of wealth is coming from the boomer down, right? And then we've got kids and we've got all-time highs on cost of everything, right? Tuition's high, whatever it is, right? So we're getting sandwiched. Um, and then we have the complexity of technology and the fact that it's pervasive in a way that's brought a lot of utility to our life, but also has only compounded the complexity across all three generations. And then we have the generational dynamic, which is the boomers, right? Don't like to talk about death necessarily as a persona. And if they're comfortable with it, money was not something they were clued in on as a kid. So they kind of come from a different upbringing. And so we've been working on how do we reach the Gen X person, educate and inform them, but then try and give them content in a way they can share it with the boomer to cause a catalytic conversation, like help them, right? Help that conversation happen, because unless everybody's talking and you understand what mom and dad's wishes are, you even have a way to broach that, it's going to be a non-starter. You'll be stuck in the mud just because you can't breach it. So, how do you advise people to talk to their parents about this stuff, regardless of their age?
Yeah, I mean, that's the difficult question is, how do you talk to people about this that you don't wanna talk to? When we're talking to the parents, they have definite ideas of how they wanna leave, money to their children, and do they wanna leave it protected so that the made-for-TV plaintiff's attorneys can't take it away from them, and that kinda thing. So they're thinking about that, but they're not wanting to tell them how much money they have, so usually when I'm meeting in family meetings and things trying to broach this topic, I say, "Well, your folks have an estate plan and their plan is to spend every dime of it. But if we mess up and we have $10 left, this is how it goes, to kind of break the ice and things like that." But the main thing I think I've found when we're trying to make or help people talk about this is if you are the child of a parent who needs help and things like that, it's just to go in with the conversation of, I need some information so that I can help you. Um, I know you're tired. I know this is getting hard to maintain the finances and all those kind of things. Would you like me to help? I mean, there's a way that we can do this legally where I can't, run away with anything, but I can help pay your bills. I can help write the checks. I can help keep track of all the bills that come through. Because that's the first thing that we see goes is that ability to pay bills and keep on track of everything like that. So if you go in with an attitude of, how can I help you? And rather than, what am I going to get out of this? Um,
Right.
like the prodigal son, give me my inheritance now so I can go spend it on loose women, and then, you're dead to me, dad. I want my inheritance now, which we even see in this century as well. Some people do that. That's not the right way to do it. Go in with the attitude to help. The attitude of, hey, we're a couple, my spouse and I, we got some adult kids here. Hey, parents, what do you think about, coming in and living with us so we don't have to send you to a skilled nursing facility? What do you think about, we got an extra bedroom, just coming down, helping us help for a while and see what we can do with this. And, I got my kids, they got school, but they could be here for you to help. And then, wife and I can be here to help. What do you think about that if we helped you with that? So there's ways to um, get this subject which are authentic, but it's that I care for you, mom and dad. I love you. I want to see the best for you, and I want to help in these latter years of your life.
And, then there's the other question, which I know is just, something that you've navigated a lot of times, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so successfully, because again, it's all dependent on the client as well. But multi-sibling type households, right? So there's the household that doesn't have any kids and they're trying to figure that out, or they have some other advocate. There's all kinds of situations, but in one where there's multiple siblings, usually, and it might be older, there's somebody who's older, somebody who's younger. There's usually the child that kind of is probably predestined to be the one who can organize it, like they're just DNA for that, but they may not want to do it. Then there's the child that's kinda like the family glue, whether they chose to be or not, that is kind of in that situation and is expected to take care of it because I'm off doing my thing and I don't wanna deal with mom and dad or their stuff or their issues. And then there's people living in different geographies or living the same way, and they have to align because just what you said, asking mom or dad, "How can I help?" Well, that could also cause some "Why are you talking to mom and dad about that stuff without me?" Right? Like, there's so many layers to this, and again, it can be the overwhelm that we talked about before, which keeps that 73% who know from doing. And if we can just help them calm down the overwhelm so that they know, "Hey, here's some resources of where I can," or "Here's some ideas that have worked where I can bridge some of these challenges I may uniquely have." What about in those situations? What have you seen work well with siblings trying to get on the same page? Or what are things to avoid doing?
Yeah, you definitely need to have some family meetings and things like that. The ultimate there is communication, and always to communicate there with this is what I need instead of saying you did this, you did that. You want the clock, mom promised it to me, or whatever. There's a lot of ways to get sideways on family harmony, which is another way to approach your parents as well, is to say, hey, I don't want to. I want the reunions and the family dinners and barbecues to continue. So we need to have a little guidance from you all. But the old age and taking care of another person can really get to the best of us without a plan. And sometimes just
Yes.
telling stories to your loved ones can help. We're reminded of the caregiver at home. Mom needs help. They're the only one close. All the other kids, like you say, live in a different geography. This person quits their job so they can live in and help mom and everything, changing chucks and all those kind of things. And mom, the whole time's plan is to put that caregiver's name on the joint bank account and constantly remind, okay, you're going to split this up between your siblings when I die, right? You're going to split this up. And you're the caregiver. You don't want to rile anything up. And you honestly, in your heart, believe, yes, yes, let's not talk about this now, mom. I'll split it up. I'll take care of everybody. And then mom dies, and all of a sudden the caregiver's there, the grief sets in, the fact that they gave up the last 4 years of their life, quit their job, moved in with mom. Maybe the kids showed up for Thanksgiving, maybe they showed up for Christmas, but they were all too busy. And then even though this is a nice person and took care of their parent, they're starting to think, my name is on that bank account, so legally that all belongs to me and I deserve it. I didn't get any help. I'm the one who quit my job. I gave up earnings. Good part of my life, I'm here taking care of somebody 24/7. And that's where the problems can start. And it all was because it wasn't a conversation ahead of time. Mom did not have an estate plan that mandated that this gets split up according to her wishes. And it's not because someone's being mean. It's just you feel entitled and rightfully so. Who am I to judge that feeling? But that's the story that even if you have a family attorney tell that to the parents, that may get them you know, off the bubble there to start planning so that doesn't happen. And a lot of times that's the safest way to talk to somebody is just say, "Hey, well, I've seen this happen elsewhere. I'm not saying it's gonna happen to you. You got good kids. The gloves don't come off when people die. They're gonna be fine. But here's what we've seen in the past. And, so it's just good in case that happens, so it won't happen to you."
Right. You've I'm gonna circle back to some of the nomenclature and pictures that are in people's mind because you really clarified, you and Owen, one of your law partners, clarified for me a while back in our meetings what asset protection, estate planning, and legacy planning are and how they're different, right? And how they kind of Venn diagram. And you wrote a post of that on yourtrustedplanner.com for those who want to check that out. There's a post on the blog about that. But short version, just clarify if I get this right from memory. Asset protection and estate planning are kind of the plan for how you're going to protect or make decisions around your stuff while you are alive. And that stuff would also include you if you become incapacitated or disabled and still live, but are no longer able to make decisions for yourself. So it's the material stuff as well as the physical embodiment of you. That's asset protection estate planner. What's in place that you designed for while you're here. Legacy planning is what happens beyond you being here in the physical realm. What is that plan? And how does that, benefit or go down through generations? Is that kind of how you think about it? Is two or four while you're here, one's for while you're gone?
I think about it that quite a bit that way, and I also look at it just kind of what is the our clients, what are they trying to achieve from the get go? Because estate planning is that orderly transition of your stuff to the next generation. And you can do that in such a way that the next generation has that asset protection that no one can take that money away from them. So if you leave a child 500,000, $1 million, whatever, you can leave it in such a way that their creditors and their predators cannot take that away from them. Okay. And that's asset protection. But you're doing that, you're using most of the state's laws and creating this impenetrable vault for your kids upon your death. So that's not necessarily doing protection for myself, right? I
Right.
may have a trust, so I'm voiding, probate and those kind of things, but that's all my living trust does, but when I pass away, that's when I can build in some of these protections for everyone else, so that's asset protection embedded within estate planning. Now, if you wanna do that for yourself, so you just don't wanna avoid probate, you also wanna be asset protected for yourself, you have to take a little different path, and that's giving up ownership or rulership over some of your property, giving that to a trustee so that they can manage that and basically have the ability to tell you no when you ask for the money because your money is set up in such a way that the trustee can tell you no, they can tell your creditors and your ex-spouses and all that, no. So that's where you get the asset protection. But now you wanna set that up for yourself. So you can either do it within a lot of the states by doing these, setting these trusts up from the get-go, basically stepping away from the property, saying, "I have no other strings attached," or you can go to the 19 states in the United States that allow us to set those things up for ourselves, where we can still be the beneficiaries of the property. So, when that's the decision that we ask the client is it just the orderly passing of their stuff? They want a lot of flexibility. They just want to avoid probate, but may want to set the spouse up or the kids up with asset protection. Or are they the types who said, I want to have asset protection, protection from taxes, protection from creditors and things like that while I'm alive? And the way that kind of put a bow on this is those clients that get that asset protection while they're alive, oftentimes they'll have part of their estate in another trust that doesn't have the asset protection just to get through the normal day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, again, so the asset protection side is a design for what I'm gonna protect while I'm alive, as well as how I'm gonna protect the generations that my estate plan gives whatever's left to over a time period so that they don't have to worry about that. One of the things I learned from you that I did not know when we first met, was that wills were public record. I did not know that. So talk to us a little bit about, the predators, the creditors, kind of where we are in society, but some of those things that people may or may not know and why it's important to understand how and what asset protection means to you. And then also what kind of things are out there if even if you had a will in place, for instance, what that could mean for your generational beneficiaries after your death as far as creditors, predators, and things like that.
Yeah, well, and that's a great question. It's multi-layered. Do we have like another 4 hours to answer all that?
Well, we're
no,
gonna do this every week, but give us the
okay.
version for today's show, and then we'll come back and keep. That's why we're gonna have to do these every week.
Yeah, so well, depending on the jurisdiction you live in, and when we say jurisdictions, it's just a law of the state of where you're at. Um, Sometimes you have to record the will um, when you write it. Not when you die, but when you write it. In most states, almost all states, you record it once you pass, and that just lets everyone know that this person has passed. And so then you basically, in most of these states, you give publication notice to the creditors because the creditors need to know that this person passed because they have a time limit to collect what you may owe them. So we, in our office, we don't like probate very much. So we define it as a lawsuit against yourself, funded by yourself for the benefit of your creditor, because they're the ones that get paid first and before any loved ones can get paid and things like that. And you basically have to petition the court, go in and get appointed as a person who gets to take this all through probate. It's the person who gets to find all the property, gets to pick it all up, gets to have temporary title of it as the representative of the estate, gets to open up an estate bank account and all these things. And then they finally read the will, know who it's supposed to go to, but they go around and they pay everybody first. They put out notices, and the creditor basically just reads the paper and says, this person might owe me money. So they just raise their hand and say, you might owe me money. They don't have to get an attorney or anything like that because we've already opened up the lawsuit, which is probate. And in a lot of jurisdictions, probate, the will, you can go down as an attorney or even as a layperson, just go in and pay a certain amount of money and get a copy of that will and read it and find out where all this money goes. Um,
Hmm.
I'm reminded of a lot of people will wonder why a creditor started calling them again after 3 or 4 years, and sometimes the reason is just because someone close to that debtor has died, and they left them in the will, and the will was probated, and the creditor's down there reading it and saying, they know how much you got, and they know that you got money, and now they want it. Uh, so that's
And this
that's
and this could happen with secured and unsecured debts. So, like, let's just say, to ground that use case in real, like, reality, if I understand it, let's just say that I have a bunch of debt and, it got charged off or whatever, and I, just the phone stopped ringing and I just don't care and I'm moving my life. And then someone that, dies that knew me and puts me in their will and leaves me $50,000, whatever, right? Whatever, the just round numbers. All of a sudden I start getting calls from my creditors and I don't know why. And the reason is because they know that I have $50,000 coming and they're going to put a lien on it.
they're gonna try, they gotta get a judgment to get a lien and all those kind of things, but
Right. But
typically.
they're going to start bothering me and they're going to do that. And the reason why is because they found out through public record that something was coming my way.
Right, and going back to the secured loan, I mean, what that creditor's gonna do first is once they find out that you are the recipient of some money, they're smart enough to know that you only get that after all the other debts are paid off. So if there's some secured debt that eats up that 50,000, they probably won't call because they know that it's not a good use of their money to go
Right.
after.
Gotcha. The
But,
point is that you can get out of probate for all the obvious reasons because it takes a layer of disclosure and control out of your hands before you even had the chance to know what's coming.
well, it just becomes public. I mean, you can look up a lot of wills on the internet. You can find out what famous people left other people if they had a will because we can all look at it. I mean, I can go down as the editor of a magazine and pay my $50 and get a copy of the will and find out who the celebrity left all their money to. Um, and the other thing, kind of hammering that creditor side of probate is that at least in our jurisdictions where we work, if the family or the personal representative, which is what we call an executor, executrix around here, uh, does not open probate in a timely fashion, the creditor can open it. Because again, they have a limited time where they can receive this, so they have the right and the ability to say, "No, we're going to open it. I don't care that you didn't want to open it. We're going to open it, and we're going to have the judge force whoever's going to be the personal representative into this situation." So, that's just kind of the public nature of that, and you die, it goes in the newspaper. A lot of people read that. Maybe not as much as did when I first started, but there's still a record
Well,
of
now
it.
it's even easier because you'll have AI search engines that'll find it and surface it to you with an automation, right? Like now it becomes even faster. So
Yeah.
let's shift gears again to another potential creditor, predator, or just exit valve for whatever that value of the estate was. Long-term care is a hidden retirement bomb. So talk to us about what Medicare does not cover that most families think it covers and kind of what you're seeing with the trends or the places to mitigate any risk related to that because we're all living longer, but we're also seeing the cost of that living longer go up.
Yeah, and that's astronomical. I look at all the, homes around, the state and things like that, and first, they were all independent living type of facilities, and then, next, you saw a lot of construction, and they made them assisted living, and then on the same property, you saw memory care, which is for, dementia or Alzheimer's and things like that. And the reason why these people were doing these frenzy building and things like that is I think deep down, everyone knows that the current generation that's in the, skilled nursing facilities and things like that, they're the last ones that can afford this stuff, so
Mm,
they're building everything just to get the money out of this current generation that are using these facilities because they're quite expensive. Around our neck of woods, memory care uh, unit is about 10,000 a month, and that does not include the medical, the doctor's fees and the medicine and things like that. That's just for the facility. And I don't care, what your nest egg is at 10 grand a month. It's going to be pretty much a burden on anyone who has less than, 4,000,000 and could, invest all that at, 4% or whatever, so they can have 160, 200,000 coming in to a year so they could self-insure. So it's astronomical numbers. And, typically, you have to pay for those units when your diagnosis is long-term care. And that just simply means that you're not in the facility any longer for rehab. You're not gonna get better. It's long term now. And a lot of those end up being your dementia or your Alzheimer's. They're mental thing where you need this memory care and things like that. As long as you can convince that, Medicare, if you can convince them that you're gonna get out sometime, they'll continue to pay for it. But if you ever get to that long-term care diagnosis, they quit paying for it. And they quit paying for it typically after 20 days. Now, Medicare will go ahead and pay up to 100 days, but they're trying to figure out whether or not it's long term or not. So after the 100th day, if it turns into long-term care, they now don't cover it and they bill the family back to the 20 days because you're only legally obligated to pay for 20 days for long-term care. So not only do you lose your Medicare insurance at the time, you also get a bill back for 180, $200 a day for 80 days. So double slap in the face there. And so the basic thing that can pay for this stuff is, like I said, it's either private care. If you can get long-term health insurance, that will pay for it, typically up to 3 years, and then you're out. They got a limit on what they do. Harder and harder and more expensive to get that kind of thing, the long-term health care. Um, and then you can have a combination of those, or you can have government benefits. And government benefits is known as Medicaid. And that's what confuses most people because the Medicare is available to everybody. Medicaid is only available to the people who cannot afford the care. And so to get on Medicaid, you basically have to have $2,000 or less in assets. And how do you get the $2,000 or less in assets? You spend everything down. So
mm.
there's different strategies and things to avoid that, but you can imagine if you don't avoid it, you're spending, 10,000 plus a month to get down to $2,000 and then you'll get some help. Will kick in. At
So
that point, you're done.
one of the strategies or directives then is if I can structure my asset protection in my trust where I take any asset I don't need to live and I put it out of my personal name and I put it into a trust structure, an asset protection structure where there's a trustee and those assets are held outside of me, then technically, although I have the assets to not be qualified in my control, I don't have the ownership in my name, and so Chris Snook or Matt Miley or whoever the person is could then be below that $2,000 limit and qualify for the Medicaid benefits while also using other things, whether it be long-term care insurance and other things that you're doing to kind of augment that cost. That's why a design
Yeah,
is
there's a Medicaid asset, or excuse me, there's a Medicaid application process, and they look at assets a little differently, and the assets that they count, those are the ones that have cannot be over 2,000. There's some assets that they don't count. And like you said, if they're out of your uh, control and things like that, they won't count as part of that 2,000. in most parts of the country, with there's some exception for states and things like that. You got to do that prior to 5 years before you apply for Medicaid. So you got to get them in out of your hands
Right.
5 years before you need Medicaid, which makes it very difficult to plan. Um, because you're giving up your stuff, and you're waiting for 5 years, and then what happens if you don't need long term care? Or what happens when you die in age 6? Or in 6 years afterwards, you made yourself impoverished, and you didn't have to. So that makes it very difficult to get that 5 year look back period, to make that work.
And if you don't believe long term in the entitlements lasting beyond this generation in their current form, then maybe you decide that's not the plan for me. In other words, if you're under 60 right now and you think, hey, you made a comment that just blew me away. I've never heard you say that before, as many hours as we spend together, about the build out and how it's basically like the last chance to confiscate the greatest wealth transfer ever, because my generation, will not be able to afford the assisted living and long term care when we get there. And so the last grab of these picks and shovels to go get that gold rush of this wealth transfer is the next 15 to 20 years while the boomers are still alive.
Yeah, and I'm not reading national trends or anything like that. That's just a personal opinion and what I've seen being in this business, seeing all that there. But the likelihood of my generation or the next generation being able to pay $10,000 a month, coupled with, if we can't, the likelihood of a government system being able to pay 10,000 a month for everybody out there, it seems remote unless, a lot of other things are done, and that's, lowering the estate tax and paying Social Security or whatever. There's a lot of tax schemes out there, but how are we gonna pay for all this stuff if there's not the wealth anymore? And so that's what we're talking about, with that trillions of dollars passing here in the next 10, 20 years. you know, I'm not sure we're gonna see memory care and all these things pass it. They may all be turned into affordable housing for all I know.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, I think that's the thing, is none of us know, but what we know is if you just do simple math, whether there's deflation or whether there's some other thing, it's just not possible to have that current system be sustainable moving beyond, call it, the
Well,
next
right.
decade.
And you and I have talked about this before too. Some of that trillion trillions is in, you know, passing on that, business to the next person. It's in business succession planning. There's a lot of people out there that think their business has no value if they die, so they're not even thinking about it. So some of that built-in money that we're thinking about will just evaporate because there wasn't a plan to push that business down to the next generation. So all that, business acumen and all
Yeah,
those things get
that's
lost.
another let's shift gears into that, kind of off script because we're not on a script. So let's shift gears into that because this audience is heavy, at least by intent. It's heavy around people who probably made their wealth one of two ways. They passively have been invested in markets through their 401ks and IRAs and all those things, as like someone who had enough income to sock away, and they did so in the greatest bull run and the greatest printing money run of the last thousands of years, right? So the last 20 years, if you had any money and assets, it was pretty impossible to not get rich unless you did something to hurt yourself and couldn't recover, right? So there's that, which means they're passive. They weren't necessarily like, Gordon Gecko on Wall Street, arbitraging and hedging. They just benefited from time and consistency. The other person, who's a 2 to $30 million family, um, probably built their wealth the old-fashioned way. They started a business, they provided values, they did it for 30, 40 years, whatever that business was. Services, plumbing, doesn't matter what it was. They built that, and 85% of the liquidity or their asset base is tied up in that business. And so whatever they pulled out of it through distributions or income or whatever, they may be invested other ways. But there may or may not be a future for them to create liquidity or exit value of that business. Maybe the kids don't want it. Maybe it only runs with them and they're too tired and whatever, right? It gets wound down. So if that evaporates, or if there's not a plan to create liquidity for that, let alone a structure to properly hold that liquidity and pass it down, we could see an evaporation of wealth, not just a transfer.
Right.
So, how
Yeah.
does someone who's a small business heavy, high net worth individual, how do they approach this differently than, say, someone who is sitting on some assets in their retirement fund who kind of had a job and retired and is trying to manage it that way? How does a small business owner approach this differently in priority than, let's say, someone who worked and just accumulated some wealth by socking away?
Okay, and that's a great question. I just would like to mention on the retirement accounts ahead of time, and once those go to your children instead of your spouse, they become what we call an inherited IRA. And under the, the rules that were passed in the Secure Act, those are paid out over 10 years. So even the old days where you got paid out over a lifetime, that wealth that could help that generation for 14, 15, 20 years, now has to come out in 10 years. So the untaxed portion of that qualified money is gonna be taken within 10 years, sooner if you decide to take it sooner. So, spreading that out over a lifetime is there's options, but they're beyond this chat, to do that. But then jumping back on into the business side, it's just it's good to work with an advisor, who either has a team behind them where they have people who can talk about the business and the succession planning. We call that exit planning as well. What the idea is behind there. You want someone with a team, certified exit planners have teams as well. One of the people we've brought in when we're talking to folks is we bring in a family counselor. We find out how to who really wants to run this business and who's just doing it until they find the next big check so that they can retire on an island somewhere. To find those things out and to find out the dynamics of the family, because sometimes you're absolutely right. Not all the kids want to do it. And if you just leave it to all the kids equally and two of them are just there to get enough money and leave, they're going to sell it to the first person comes along, leaving the person who wanted to run it for the rest of their life in dire straits kind of thing. So you want to figure all these things out. So you want to work with someone who has a plan.
Well, or right, or there's the whole like, let's say that you're the patriarch, you're the matriarch, you're whatever, you built the wealth and it's in this business and you have a couple of kids, 3 kids, whatever you have, and you kinda know, hey, one's really interested or maybe geared towards it and they kinda want it. The other 2 I want to benefit equally or mutually, but there has to be a way for them to buy it out to keep it in control, because if you leave them the asset and 2 want out for their own needs, then
Right.
how do they fund that, right? And so again, as a small business owner, when you're thinking about that, you kind of you have to decide what is your wish for the business. Then you got to talk about what do the kids care or not care about? Do they want it? Do they just want the money associated with it? What do they want, right? And then how do I help them execute? That's where that legacy plan or that asset protection design comes in, because how do I help them execute optionality individually? How do I give them sovereignty around their decision without it jacking up somebody else's sovereignty in my beneficiary tree?
Right, which is communication, Chris. Again, I mean, some families just say, "Hey, we got a certain amount of life insurance. We're going to have the company buy it, and we're going to leave the life insurance to the children who don't want the business to equalize the fact we're giving the business to the one child." And that only works for a while because inevitably the one child will work really, really hard and make that business worth a lot of money, and they won't see that, when they first got the division that everything was pretty much equal, and just because of the hard work of that one individual, they made the business worth more. It's now that, well, obviously, mom and dad loved you most because they left you the big part of the estate. You gotta foresee that and run through that and things like that. But even on before you even think about an internal buyout or which could also be one of your good managers or something may wanna buy it or whatever, you gotta get the business ready to sell, which typically takes, around 5 years. Uh, but there's things you can do if you know when you're gonna retire and you start on it, there's things you can do to move your business from, like, an okay business or dies upon the owner's death to it's a normal business to best in class. And if those multipliers are always used in valuing the business. So if you can make your business worth more, you may have more people who want to buy it. And I think it all starts with the owners coming up with a retirement plan. Okay, right? You had a plan to make your money. You had the financial plan and the investment plan, everything like that. You should have a plan on how you want that money to go to other people, right? With your estate plan, which is when you pass away. But you should probably spend a chapter or two in your plan book to figure out what you want to do when you retire. You can only play golf so long. You can only, if you go to work every day because of the interaction with your employees, you're not going to get that when you retire and move somewhere. So that will help you decide what is the monetary amount that you need for retirement. And then you can decide, how do I get my business to be there, whether the kids buy it or I buy it? Or maybe I can just have the building that I'm going to keep. I'm going to sell the business. I'm going to keep the building, and my kids are going to pay me rent stream to kind of fund this retirement life. But you got to work it all out. Otherwise, a lot of people just retire and they pass away because it's nothing like they
Well, and I
thought it
think,
would be.
yeah, I think again, back to the kind of nomenclature and pictures being so important. We think about retirement, and if you work for someone else your whole life, there's probably a picture where that sounds like a great day because you're not going to have a boss anymore and you're going to have enough money to live the kind of life you want. And you're going to do whatever you think you're going to do. Most entrepreneurs and small business owners don't see retirement as a good destination because we love what we do. That's why we went out and started doing it. Like you said, we love the interaction, we love leading, we love following, we love solving problems, whatever it is. And so that energy is not going to be replaced right away by some hobby. You could find something that you could pour yourself into, but it's a very hard transition just in general to exit at all, even when you know you should, even if you have the money, because emotionally there's a void. So there's all those other pieces that have to be part of the conversation. This is a conversation heavy product, time, decision tree, all the things. That's why we're doing these Matt chats. I know we're at time for today, and this is why we're doing them every Wednesday for as and many Wednesdays as we can have you, because we want this to be an open conversation with the audience. Whether you're live or on replay, you can submit comments, you can ask questions. We'll get back to you. We'll prioritize those in future Matt chats. So thank you for tuning in, regardless of where you tuned in from. If you're not subscribed to Shields and Succession on Wealth Matters 3.0 and you're not following or subscribed to Matt, please do both just so that you can keep getting the alerts on when we're doing these and join or share them with your friends. Matt, I appreciate you being here. I guess final thoughts for today's purposes. What should someone do? And then we'll give out a call to action. If they are looking for an advisor and asset protection and they're in all 50 states, they can call 307 463 3600 and a human will answer the phone and they could have a pre-consult, no charge. They could just kind of see if there's a direction that we could help them with. If they're a Colorado resident, they should call 970-820-0090. So again, no call to actions, no click through websites, none of that. If you want to talk to someone with Matt, just pick up the phone and do it old school. It's a human to human thing. If you already have an advisor, hopefully this video gives you something to talk with them about. And let us know how we can serve you in the future. But Matt, final thoughts on something that you'd encourage everybody to do today if they're a little bit overwhelmed or if they feel clear and they're still wondering where to start. What would your final thought be?
Well, I would, get some paper out and start jotting down those thoughts, because when they're in the mind, they're kind of conceptual or theoretical, and it's pretty hard to act on anything up there. Just maybe some of the questions that you have and whatnot. And then you can start looking around to see for people to help you. But it's kinda deciding, where you need the help. Maybe you need a retirement plan. Maybe you need a estate plan. Maybe you just need a financial plan or something like that, but knowing what you need kinda if you get that out there in your thought, you can kinda think about it and start getting those solved, uh, by, just thinking about it and getting things put together. But the big thing is, not all attorneys need to be scary, and you don't need to, fear, talking to them and things like that, and just go ahead and use your, resources that you have around, to find out a little more about, who's out there and who can help and those kind of things. So the big advice is just to journal a little bit of what you think you learned today and then ask questions about it.
Well, and thanks for everybody who's tuned in. Recognize that lawyers, like it or not, their business model lives on a billable hour. We've just gotten a free billable hour from you with 30 plus years worth of experience and pattern recognition in it. And we're going to keep bringing these to you for free every Wednesday at this time. and the topics will change. They'll be revisited. The questions will change. You'll help drive that as an audience. And so, Matt, for that, thank you for donating and giving us that hour. We'll let you get back to your work, and we'll see everybody else next time on the Atomic Level Shields in Succession Matt Chats. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, everybody.